Hey, up, right. July has been an exciting month coming from Honda motorcycles, hasn't it? Now, this week in the UK, we've seen the launch of the new Honda CB400 a genuine modern classic from Honda, styled along the lines of the CB from the 1980s, I think the CB750. Now, I know people will be jumping into the comments already saying, oh no, that's not a modern classic, you know, this was the 1980s, you know, I'm 60, 70, whatever, and I remember bikes from the 1960s, that's what a modern classic is. Well, actually, no, it isn't. Demographics are changing. There seems to be this silly idea that, you know, the main motorcycle buying demographic are guys from the 50s through to the 70s, which is true. And the main idea is that when those guys have died out, that'll be the end of motorcycling and it'll definitely be the end of modern classics. But Honda have played a very smart game here, because that's not how it's going to play out. It's not just Honda that's playing this game. Kawasaki, Yamaha and Suzuki to some extent are doing exactly the same thing. Aging isn't something that's just limited to the current 60 to 80 year old age bracket. Everybody is aging at exactly the same rate. And guys that are in the 40s now that will be looking to buy these kind of bikes in the next 5, 10, 20 years will remember bikes from the 1980s, maybe even the 1970s. And that is the modern classic that their hearts are going to be set on. Although they've had some degree of success, the current modern classic lineup that we have available to us today, bikes based on 1950s and 1960s machines, are all becoming a bit cliched. Triumph have done this concept to death. People are starting to get a little bit tired of it. So have Royal Enfield with the 650 Classic and the 650 Bullet, been a bit of a disappointment in the long run. Now, don't forget, this channel gets around 500 comments a day, and I try my best to read all of them. And it's clear to me that, you know, the guys that are looking for modern classics, a growing number of guys that are looking for modern classics, are looking for bikes that look like the magazine centerfolds and the posters that they had up on their bedroom walls when they were teenagers. Bikes like this. Now, the CB range is probably one of Honda's most famous motorcycle ranges. It's been going since 1959. The CB400 has the slightly detuned inline four-cylinder liquid-cooled motor, which I think has been used in the Hornet since about 2017. Packaged as a distinctly early 1980s universal Japanese motorcycle. Now, that phrase, universal Japanese motorcycle, was actually coined by the motorcycle press to be a sort of an insult towards that class of motorcycle. It was an attempt to make Japanese bikes look as though they had no soul or character. They were all the same, a sort of a generic motorcycle type that somehow made them inferior to the unreliable, outdated, oil-leaking British bikes of the day. And we all know how that panned out. Japan took the world by storm and dominated the market for the next 40 years. Because as it turned out, what motorcyclists actually wanted were bikes that performed well, were useful, and were reliable. Not a nostalgic British brand that left them stranded at the roadside twice a week. Now, like I say, the Japanese manufacturers have been very clever at the way they've allowed the market to play out with modern classic motorcycles. At the end of the day, you don't have to be the first there to be the most successful. They've let the likes of Triumph, BSA and Royal Enfield explore the market and prove its viability before they move in and take over. And we're at that sort of crossroads now with the modern classic market. Royal Enfield is already still struggling to sell pre-registered models from over a year ago. Even with attractive discounts, attractive interest rates on PCP deals, and accessory bundles thrown in. The GB350S here in the UK is dominating sales when it's available. And as I predicted about 18 months ago, Honda and the other Japanese manufacturers have just been standing on the sidelines, watching the game play out, waiting for a time to strike. And I think that time is coming now. Now, the CB400 is a lovely looking bike. It's 10,500 and something pounds, I think. It's not my cup of tea. But something else happened this month, about 2 weeks ago, in Japan, that is definitely my cup of tea. The new Honda 400 Super Four was released in Japan on the 10th of July. It wasn't a surprise, we knew it was coming. The old CB400 Super Four was retired back in 2022 because they could no longer force it to comply with emissions regulations. So Honda has had to design and future-proof a complete new engine from scratch. Again, this is an unashamedly early 1980s styled modern classic, but for the moment it's reserved for the Japanese market only. Now, I want to be clear, this is speculation on my part, but I've been trolling through all the press releases for this motorcycle, and for a start, Honda have officially said that, you know, the possibility of it being introduced to Europe is open, but they've got no plans to do that as yet. Now, what other model did they say that about 2-3 years ago? Yes, it was the GB350S. Now, Japanese motorcyclists are very much into the modern classic genre of motorcycles, especially bikes from the 70s and the 80s, you know, the GB and bikes like the CL500. In fact, classic ownership is very much part of Japanese culture, so it makes sense to dip your toes and test the waters in the Japanese market first. That's exactly what they did with the GB350S. Now, 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, to be honest, I would have said, you know, the chances of them introducing a new 400cc inline-four into the UK market or even the European market are virtually zero, because, you know, everybody likes big bikes here. But as I mentioned in a video about 4 years ago now, that's going to change, and it has indeed changed. We're now going through what has become known as the Great Downsizing. People are swapping from big bikes and going down to more sensible middleweight and small capacity bikes, and this CB400 Super Four fits exactly into that bracket. The GB350S has proven to Honda that you know, a small capacity motorcycle is a good seller in Europe, UK, New Zealand and Australia. As it stands at the moment, bikes like that have very long legs in the market. So I think it's very likely that they're going to bring it here probably sometime in the next 2 years, or something very like it, because in one particular foreign press release that I read, it said that they were also going to use this engine, where this new 400cc liquid-cooled inline engine, in other variants for other markets. Now, admittedly, it might have been a misquote. I only saw this one particular statement in one article, but it was this other variants thing that caught my eye, because, you know, they've got the fully fared version and the naked version that I've just shown you, and they were talking about other variants. So it seems that perhaps they're looking at some other modern classic variant for the Western market. And they have a huge back catalogue of four-cylinder historic models to choose from. And the most famous, legendary, historic model that my mind immediately rushed to was the HONDA 404 from the mid-70s. Now, this bike was legendary in the 1970s going into the early 1980s, and it was a big part of my childhood. And I think one of the most lasting memories I've got is, you know, I've told you before about my best mates, Dave and Keith, how we used to ride into the Hull city centre on a Saturday morning to buy records. I remember there being one of these parked outside W.H. Smith's, and we stood and stared at it and talked about it for about 20 minutes. It was and still is a drop-dead gorgeous motorcycle that was later modernised and then reintroduced in 1992 as the Honda 400 Super Four. Now, as I've said, this is purely speculation on my part, you know, based on a bit of research and reading between the lines, but a 404 modern classic motorcycle in the European and probably the US market would be an absolute killer for the modern classic market. Nothing else could come anywhere close to it. I wouldn't expect it to be an exact replica of the 404, but you know, something reminiscent of the 404 with the 404 name. Bearing in mind the change in demographics would absolutely clean up, especially in the UK market. What do you think? Is it something you would like to see? Now, just going to back to the new 400 Super Four. This bike is reputed to be pumping out somewhere between 56 and 58 brake horsepower. Again, you know, as a modern classic on the market, people tend to favour performance. It would clean up in the 400cc market. There's nothing could come anywhere near it. And you can harp on as much as you like about, you know, it wouldn't have the character of a single cylinder motor because it's got 4 cylinders. Well, you know, people like me grew up on 4 cylinders. We loved 4-cylinder motorcycles that had engines with a similar configuration to our dad's car. They sounded fantastic and they went like shit off a stick. And the attraction of the quaint nostalgia that comes with a long stroke single only lasts so long. Now, just going on the recommended retail price of the standard naked Honda CB400 Super Four, translated to Great British pounds, it comes in at just under £6,000. Now, that's a similar price to the CL500 at nearly £1,000 less than the list price of a Royal Enfield Interceptor 650, but with about an extra 12 brake horsepower and of course Honda's superior build quality. Put it up against the Triumph 400 or something like the Gorilla 450 and yes, they do have a price advantage, but this bike has something in the region of 18 brake horsepower advantage. That power differential is almost a full Hunter 350. Whichever way you look at it, you know, if they did introduce even, you know, the standard 400 Super Four that's for sale in Japan at the moment, or if they did come up with something a little bit more classic, Royal Enfield's troubles would just get worse. And with a price tag of not much more than a Triumph 400, I dare say it would substantially into their sills as well. Right, as I say, this is just a speculation video. None of this might happen at all, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and doing so helping to support this channel. I do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you'd leave a like, hype this video if you've got the hype button available, and consider becoming a subscriber. I will of course be back next week, so until then, ride safely and I'll see you soon.